Welcome, fellow explorers, to Project Makirraji. Last time we explored how the effects of Kyphora's separation into Kypho and Dexterra affected both the climate and the continent's inhabitants. In this episode we will take a break from the mainland and explore the islands of Makirraji. Islands, unlike larger land masses, exhibit particular pressures on their inhabitants. Being completely cut off from the mainland, islands often create extremely odd ecosystems compared to those of the mainland. On Makirraji, there are bound to be thousands of islands, each fostering their own unique ecosystems. In this episode we will only explore a few noteworthy islands, as it would be quite unfeasible to explore every one of the thousands of islands on the planet. Commonly, islands are pieces of land that were once part of the mainland but were somehow cut off and isolated. One such example of this on Makirraji is a piece of land located in the large Kyphoran Sea. This piece of land has been connected to the mainland throughout its existence. However, as geological processes proceed and the Ice Age begins to recede, for reasons we will discuss in future episodes, sea levels may rise higher than ever before, cutting off this land and creating an island. This island will be called Isla Raldo. At the beginning of its time as an island, Isla Raldo will have an environment more or less identical to that of the mainland. The dominant clades include the Beluodonta, Eraloshapod, and the Mathaladent. Soon after these clades become isolated from the mainland, the ecosystems of Isla Raldo will undergo some rapid changes. Unlike the mainland, islands have a limited amount of resources. Clades such as the Eraloshapod, who are large hypercarnivores, require a steady diet of meat to stay alive. Additionally, males in particular require large areas of hunting ground to hunt for prey and avoid competition with the females. Additionally, these predators will have to deal with lower genetic diversity and may not even be able to sustain a stable breeding population at all. These factors may result in the decline and inevitable extinction of the Eraloshapod on the island. Large herbivores will face some of the same challenges as the Eraloshapod. Herbivores tend to live at higher population densities than their predators, meaning they may find greater success in establishing a breeding population. However, the Beluodonta require a vast amount of vegetation in order to sustain their large body sizes, and with the disappearance of the large predators, they may be able to allocate more time to grazing. Yet this still may not be enough to sustain their massive sizes. This may result in an adaptation called insular dwarfism, in which a large animal shrinks in size in response to isolation. This trend is most commonly seen on islands and is represented by Foster's rule. This biological hypothesis states that animals often go through changes in body size in response to isolation. This rule is most commonly applied to islands. Generally, the smaller an island is, the more extreme the effects of insular dwarfism will be. In the Beluodonta's case, they may shrink to less than a quarter of their original size. This reduces the amount of food they will need to consume, allowing them to exist on the island without starving. This clade of Beluodonta may only consist of 3 species. We will dub them the Parvodolian. Interestingly, Foster's rule doesn't always result in animals getting smaller. In some cases it can result in animals growing larger. The pressure of predation has been lifted off the island. In particular, Smaller clades who have stayed small to avoid predators may now find the resources of the island unguarded. This means smaller animals on islands often have greater access to resources than they would on the mainland. This results in these animals getting larger. The mulariforms may take full advantage of the resources available to them. Being as adaptable as they are, they would have no problem adapting to new niches. Perhaps one species of mulariform grows extremely large, exhibiting insular gigantism. These larger mulariforms may take up the role of predator, feeding on the smaller animals in the island's forests. However, they may not be able to take on larger prey such as the parvodolian. This giant mulariform would have a finite limit to its size because of the group's lack of a strong internal support system. This group may be represented by only one species, which we will call the pax forms. Another clade that has gotten stranded on Isla Raldo is the alozontopod. These herbivores usually congregate in massive herds and migrate across the mainland. However, the island doesn't have enough resources to support such large herds. Therefore, they would see a massive decline in population alongside a decrease in size. Aside from a general lack of resources, islands also put pressure on animals in different ways. As the alozontopod's population stabilizes, females will have much fewer choices when it comes to mate selection. Therefore, if the females want to maximize the chances of their offspring surviving, they will need to be incredibly picky when selecting mates. This is yet another example where Bateman's principle comes into effect, in which females take on the greater reproductive burden, therefore needing to make sure their investment is worth it. This may prompt males to begin displaying their fitness to females in some way. They already possess their bright fur, which they use to communicate, but in these males, they may use them to display to females. This may lead to another example of sexual dimorphism, with males evolving progressively larger and larger displays to impress potential mates. This is an example of Fisherian runaway. However, on islands, Fisherian runaway can be taken to the most extreme levels. You see, on islands there are very little, if any, predators. This means that males can afford to have ridiculously large display structures without many drawbacks. In these alozontopod, extreme Fisherian runaway may lead to massive display feathers dragging along the ground. When mating season arrives, the males will attempt to lift their display arms into the air, with the male that can successfully lift the largest display structure getting the females. We will call these cumbersome creatures the synthepods. Next we venture to the second largest island on the planet, Tugana. Tugana is a very small piece of continental crust that is sliding alongside the larger plate of Kaifo, creating sharp mountains on the island's eastern coasts and high volcanism in the area. Vegetation on this island may be mainly composed of rainforest clades, with clades such as the Exosia being more common along the island's swampy coasts. Perhaps, on this island, a relic of the past survives. Long ago, during the colonization of land, almost all the tentacuta were pushed to extinction by competition from more advanced clades. But perhaps some survived. Perhaps a small group of tentacuta arrived on Tugana in a rafting event and set up a population, safe from the fierce competition on the mainland. In addition to the tentacuta, the island would be inhabited by many species of mulariform unique to the island. As the tentacuta get accustomed to their island home, they will be forced to undergo a change in diet. On the mainland, they used to hunt large prey such as the volumare, but with limited space and no large prey to speak of, these predators need to adapt fast. Their main source of food may become the mulariforms. To better catch these small nimble creatures, they will need to adapt. Firstly, a smaller body means they require less fuel to sustain themselves. Shorter legs and a long serpentine shape allows them to squeeze into the many cracks and crevices to chase down prey. Additionally, their tentacles may grow extremely long, around half their body length, allowing them to reach even the tightest of spaces. Lastly, their feet may develop depressions in their centers, forming suction cups. These suction cups allow the predator to climb extremely steep surfaces. Truly, nowhere is safe for the island's mulariforms. We will call these formidable predators the Orostucuta. However, with how close Tugana is to mainland Kaifo, it is inevitable that another rafting event would occur. Many of the rainforest clades retreated southward as the Ice Age began, with the largest continuous rainforests on Kaifo being located on its western shore, bordering the large mountains pushed up by the continental split. Perhaps a clade of rainforest dweller, more specifically the Detronadant, could arrive on the island. These small, lightweight creatures would be easily carried on mats of floating vegetation, eventually washing up on Tugana. And once they arrive, they will completely destabilize the ecosystem. Their potent venom would keep them from being eaten by the Orostucuta. With no predators to speak of, the Detronadant would undergo a massive population boom, outcompeting many of the native mulariform species. This would put pressure on the Orostucuta, severely damaging their small population. They also possess a hard inner skeleton, which may allow them to begin competing with the Orostucuta directly. Perhaps one group evolves to feed on the abundant ground cover on the island. This would take this group out of competition with the mulariforms. Their skeletons allow them to quickly become the largest animals on the island. However, their splayed posture isn't very effective at bearing heavy loads. If they are to get any larger, their legs need to be positioned under the body. Without any natural predators, these creatures are free to be as slow and bulky as they want. Even if a desperate predator tries attacking the herd, they could make quick work of it using their venom. Their tentacles would develop flat teeth instead of the sharper teeth of their ancestors, being used to chew plant matter and bring it into the mouth. We will call them the Placutudent. However, if left unchecked, these herbivores have the potential to strip the island bare of vegetation, destroying this unique ecosystem. But before this happens, a predator may evolve. Perhaps another lineage of Detronadant evolves to hunt these large herbivores. However, there is still the issue of their prey's venom. However, these predatory Detronadant, being descended from the same clade, also have venom. Perhaps these creatures have an immunity to their own venom, an adaptation that is essential so that they don't end up killing each other, or themselves. Although the venom of these predatory forms and the Placutudent may be slightly different in composition, it wouldn't be a stretch to say that these hunters could evolve a universal venom resistance. Once this happens, the ecosystem will quickly stabilize. Populations of the placotulant and the ancestral detronadant will decline to acceptable levels, allowing new larriforms to bounce back and in turn, the Oahro. To better hunt their prey, these detronadant may become more muscular and steadily built, adapted for nimble movement in between groves of trees and through herds of panicking placotulant. We will call these resistant hunters the Baghdadidant. Although the Baghdadidant's presence does greatly stabilize the ecosystem, they are also in direct competition with the Oahro. Perhaps, unlike on the mainland, these two clades could undergo niche partitioning, with the Oahro hunting exclusively new larriforms, and the Baghdadidant will feed on the detronadant and the placotulant. Unlike Isla Raldo or Tugana, many islands are created by volcanic hotspots that shoot out molten rock, which cools to form island chains. These island chains are often extremely isolated, and rafting events to these places are rare. However, some animals still find ways to colonize these islands. Flying species are typically the first to settle into new land. Fresh islands offer safe breeding grounds and a place to rest in between long flights. Perhaps one clade of Flugophoterid evolves for a seafaring lifestyle. The ocean offers bountiful prey which these creatures could take advantage of. In order to make longer flights, their wings may enlarge to double their body's length. In order to catch fish, these creatures will need some semi-aquatic adaptations. A more streamlined head allows them to puncture the water's surface without resistance. Their wings can serve as rudimentary paddles, and their tail might develop a small fin at the end to increase their speed and maneuverability. Their tail is also useful when exiting the water and transitioning back to flight, acting as a rudder to push them out of the water. Their tongue may become extremely spiky, which is useful when trying to capture wet sea creatures. These creatures can stay out at sea for months on end, and are capable of making migrations all across the planet. This means that these creatures will be some of the first contact the other two continents have had with nymphous life. We will call them the Rectuputrid. One island created by volcanic activity is the island chain of Exosia. The island chain is composed of three main islands, being Zax, Exa, and Shia, and many smaller islands that have been eroded over time. This island chain is very remote, being one of the most poleward landmasses in the northern hemisphere. The island is constantly battered with strong winds and ice storms, although the ocean never freezes over. Perhaps the first life to arrive on these islands is a clade of Judamatha. Unlike the rainforest animals on Dexterra, the Judamatha have managed to persist, thriving near the coasts of the continent, where the northern mountains build up enough moisture to mimic their old habitat. They have expanded their host range from the Speculative to any plant larger than them. However, unlike the Speculative, most other plants aren't equipped to have another organism siphoning off their resources. Thus, the Judamatha have become extremely parasitic and often end up killing their host. Perhaps some Judamatha are swept away by coastal storms and happen to end up on the shores of Exosia. Yet, without any hosts to attach to, these plants would die if it were not for one key quirk of islands such as Exosia. Since the island is volcanic in origin, its rocks are rich in minerals. These minerals may be able to give the Judamatha the boost they need to live without a host. Their tough roots, initially adapted to burrow through bark, may be able to quickly break down the rocks of their island into rich volcanic soil. As they adapt, they may lose the need for a host entirely. To combat the cooler temperatures of Exosia, they may develop thicker skin and begin clumping together into compact mats of vegetation. Eventually, these plants cover all 3 main islands, paving the way for future colonists. We will call these resilient plants the Tapitaprophyta. Soon after the Tapitaprophyta cover the island, the Rectuputrid will discover it. Some use it as a breeding grounds, but perhaps others decide to make a more permanent stay. Perhaps one group of Rectuputrid begins flocking on the beaches of the islands, resting there until they go out to feed. With no natural predators on the island, they have no real need to leave, nor do they have a need for flight. Flightlessness is common among island animals. Islands often have abundant food and no large predators, so flight isn't needed. Thus, many different clades have developed flightlessness on islands. These Rectuputrid already have muscular wings, a tail fin, and the predatory adaptations needed to catch aquatic prey. So perhaps one group loses their flight entirely. Their wings may stiffen into large structures similar in function to a pectoral fin. Their crest may enlarge and act as a dorsal fin, and their tail may become their main source of propulsion. They use their large flat bodies to disturb patches of sediment, pushing out distressed prey. Once the prey is out in the open, they strike, using their specially adapted tongue to capture their prey. Of course, these creatures aren't fully aquatic. They can use their wings to slowly pull themselves onto the island's beaches where they rest, mate, and lay their ootheca. These creatures, which we will call the Tranquility, form large colonies across all of Exosia's islands. But Rectuputrid won't be the only creatures on this island. Perhaps a small clade of the Capade washes up on the island's shores. However, they find no substantial food to speak of, with the ground cover being dense and tough, and the Tranquility retreating into the ocean. They will have to turn to the only source of food left, the Rectuputrid. Perhaps one group takes advantage of the massive amount of ootheca the Rectuputrid lay on the island. However, these ootheca are laid on the steep cliffs on the island's coasts, created by harsh waves and easily eroded lava rock. A fall from these cliffs could almost certainly lead to their death. Therefore, these creatures' bodies may shrink, lessening the risk of rocks breaking underneath their weight. Additionally, these creatures' legs may elongate, wrapping around rocks, giving them multiple points of contact. Their feet may split, forming 2 opposite-facing toes, allowing them to securely grapple to rocks. When these creatures are in such precarious positions, they can't afford to risk falling off while looking for their next meal. Thus, their eyes may be positioned atop of long stalks to look around obstacles and over ledges without compromising their center of mass. For the same reasons, these creatures' joints may be extremely loose, letting them rotate limbs in unnatural ways to grab objects or squeeze through tight spaces. Lastly, their tentacles may be equipped with blunt crushing teeth, used to break open the ootheca. We will call these precarious opportunists the Scandectory. But perhaps other the Capades specialize to catch the Rectuputrid themselves. However, it is extremely hard to catch them for obvious reasons. But these creatures may take advantage of the high traffic going in and out of their nesting sites, lying in wait to snatch an unlucky rectuputrid. To aid in this, their legs may become extremely muscular. Their back legs may gain large elastic tendons that store large amounts of energy, and when the predator is ready, all that stored up energy can be released in magnificent leaps that can propel the creature up to 4 meters into the air. Mid-air, their spines may stiffen, positioning their body in the optimal aerodynamic shape. The bones in their tentacles may fuse together, creating a rigid structure that can move swiftly to clamp down on prey mid-air. Their teeth are interlocking, preventing escape once the prey is in their jaws. We will call these athletic hunters the halimapod. Next, we venture to the largest island on the planet. In actuality, this is a piece of Nymphaeus's continental shelf that rises above the ocean, forming jagged peaks and steep cliffs. This sizable piece of land will facilitate much more complex and diverse ecosystems than those of smaller islands. We will call this island Clandia. Foliage on this island may largely be made up of primitive clades of Artanagile. Unlike islands such as Exosia, Clandia existed long before life arrived on land. Thus, its ecosystems may serve as a refuge for archaic clades. Perhaps the ancestral Pestanta never arrived on the island. However, the Flesadola did. Without the added competition from the Pestanta, the Flesadola are free to specialize and adapt to niches they are excluded from on the mainland. As these creatures further specialize for inland life, they may forego the scaly skin of their mainland counterparts. Instead, they may evolve thick, leathery skin to venture further inland. Their bodies may become thicker and their legs more muscular to navigate the uneven terrain of Clandia. Additionally, their tentacles may broaden, pressing together to form a completely enclosed chamber. This allows them to take larger bites of food, thus increasing their feeding efficiency. We will call these unique Flesadola the Veloridus. As the Veloridus spreads across the island, they will undergo an adaptive radiation alongside early mainland clades. The first specialized forms to emerge may be bulky herbivores. The larger land area of Clandia compared to other islands would allow creatures to sustain larger body sizes, although they would be nowhere near the size of mainland clades. Their ancestors fed mainly on dead animals, with only a small percentage of their diet being made up of plant matter. However, as they make the transition to a fully herbivorous lifestyle, they will need a stronger stomach to break down tough plant matter and extract as much nutrition as possible. To achieve this, they may develop a chambered stomach where fermentation can occur. Fermentation is a process by which bacteria in the animal's gut aid it in breaking down food and extracting extra nutrients. Now, with a gut able to fuel larger sizes, these herbivorous forms may develop broader mouth pedals with flat, rasping teeth to scrape off plant matter in large mouthfuls. Additionally, their front pair of boneless legs may become long and flexible, being used to wrap around plants and pull them closer to the mouth. We will call these forms the Raidoremus. As these new herbivores evolve, predators will evolve to hunt them. However, seeing as the island is mostly covered with Artanagile, there isn't much in terms of cover. Their basic hydrostatic skeleton wouldn't be powerful enough to support fast movements such as out-sprinting prey. Therefore, these creatures must find a way to catch their prey by surprise. Perhaps these predators could engage in aggressive mimicry, disguising themselves as something that would otherwise be considered harmless in order to bring prey within striking distance. Perhaps their model would be the abundant roots and vines of the Artanagile. Their bodies may elongate and their skin may adopt a yellow tone. Additionally, they may partially bury their lower half in the soil and position their legs so they resemble smaller roots. They can remain in this state for weeks on end, slowing their metabolism until an opportunity presents itself. Once a target is within range, they will pounce with alarming speed, pushing off the ground with their muscular bodies. Sharp teeth would rasp at the skin of their prey, doing as much damage as possible. Counterintuitively, they then release their target. You see, these creatures do not possess the raw strength to take down most large game on the island without risking injury, and if their prey were to somehow escape their jaws, without the speed to give chase, the predator would be out of a meal. However, their island habitat might present the solution. Unlike the mainland, island animals have a confined space in which they live, therefore they cannot run forever. Thus, when these creatures attack, they focus on doing as much surface-level damage as possible before releasing their prey. They then use highly developed olfactory receptors to search for their prey. Over many days, they slowly track down their target, letting the injuries they inflicted take their toll. Heavy blood loss and the possibility of infection will, over time, weaken or even kill their prey. And once that happens, these predators are there, ready to reap the benefits. We will call these persistent hunters the Mendaximus. But these ecosystems won't remain free of mainland influence forever. As life evolves, small rafting events may be common, bringing over small species of heteromorpha, which easily fit into the ecosystem. Perhaps new plants could find their way to Clandia, too. The Mixotangile are known for floating in the air with the use of their gas sacs. This allows them to disperse far and wide on the mainland. But these events happen by pure chance. Perhaps one clade of these plants evolves to take advantage of their buoyancy. They may develop two sails on either side of their gas sacs to catch the wind and give them directional speed. This adaptation would allow them to cover much greater distances in shorter times. However, if these plants get pushed into the ocean, they will have nowhere to take root, and thus they would die. To fix this, these plants may develop a complex system of sensors that can pick up on differences in the air around them. The most important distinction is air moisture. Once these creatures encounter dry air, they begin to release gas from their gas sacs in controlled bursts, lowering themselves down where their roots hook onto the soil and take root. Additionally, these plants commonly serve as resting spots for traveling rectuputrid. These plants' adaptations reliably prevent them from becoming lost at sea, but it is also extremely useful when it comes to colonizing islands. Perhaps some of these plants make landfall onto Clandia. Their verticality would allow them to contend with the already well-established Mixotangile without outcompeting them. We will call them the Alaridifita. But plants won't be the only things traveling to Clandia. Perhaps a small clade of ungulatarid finds its way to the island by means of a rafting event. This new arrival has the potential to completely destabilize the ecosystems of Clandia. However, that may not happen. Their small size and herbivorous nature mean they could still be considered prey by the Mendaximus. However, their new island home does pose some considerable challenges they will have to overcome if they are to make a home here. The ungulatarid are specialized for high speeds on flat, open terrain. The rough and uneven terrain of Clandia, plus the island's smaller area, means that these creatures' main strength is effectively nullified. Instead, these creatures need to specialize for stability. They may do this in the most unorthodox way possible. These creatures possess a second hoof toe that became vestigial as they specialized for high speeds, but in this island environment, it could be useful. Perhaps their second toe grows extremely large, effectively forming a second lower leg. This configuration, although extremely unorthodox, provides high stability but reduces their speed to a tiny fraction of their previous abilities. Additionally, their hooved feet allow them to gain purchase on even the most uneven terrain. Their flexible bodies curl inwards, positioning their center of mass firmly between their legs. This new, strange, body plan is highly effective in steep and uneven terrain. We will call these strange island dwellers the Fishudactylos. Yet not all arrivals on Clandia may be permanent ones. Due to the island's smaller surface area and subsequently smaller herbivores, there aren't many large island-dwelling predators. But it isn't impossible. Perhaps a clade of Rectuputarid evolves to visit Clandia and feed on its inhabitants alongside aquatic creatures. Since these creatures aren't confined to the island, they are able to feed on both the mainland and Clandia. This allows them to achieve much larger sizes than typical island predators, allowing them to feed on all the island's inhabitants. However, the planet's higher gravity compared to Earth's makes larger flyers extremely implausible. However, these creatures may be able to achieve the sizes required to effectively hunt on ground level thanks to one clever adaptation. These creatures have become partially herbivorous, feeding exclusively on the gas sacs of plants. Once the gas is in their stomachs, it is funneled to the top of the stomach while heavier food particles fall through to the intestines. This gives them natural buoyancy, subverting the higher gravity and thus letting them achieve the largest sizes seen in any flying clade on the planet. Alongside their size, these creatures may develop multiple adaptations to aid them in terrestrial locomotion and hunting. Their tails may become large, flat, and muscular. This allows them to rest some of their weight on their tail instead of relying solely on their wings. Their mouths may become large, flexible, and slightly nightmarish. Their mouth's flexibility allows them to wrap around prey and probe into smaller spaces. These adaptations will allow these creatures, which we'll call the Trampetolassa, to become the top predators on Clandia. In addition, these creatures might find great success on mainland nymphs, feeding on small creatures and the young of others. The last island we will visit today is another volcanic island located off of Nymphus's eastern coast. However, unlike Exosia, this island is one large land mass instead of multiple smaller islands. We will call this land Oahro Island. Oahro is one of the most isolated islands on the planet. And, due to its small size, it may not be able to affect the air enough for the Alaridifera to detect it. Thus it would remain barren of vegetation for some time. But perhaps in the dense swamps of Nymphus, a new dispersal mechanism is evolving. The seasonal monsoons that sweep across Nymphos often carry plant seeds and spores out to sea where they die. But perhaps one clade takes advantage of these weather events. Perhaps they begin releasing gametes before the monsoon season, and once a female gas sac is fertilized, it will grow a hard shell around itself to prevent the seeds within from being eaten. Once the monsoons arrive, these pods are swept into rivers where they are carried far off to new soil. However, some seeds may end up washing into the ocean and eventually beaching themselves on Oahro's shores. These would be the first life forms on the island, quickly spreading far and wide, creating vast forests. We will call these plants the Siliquophyta. These plants offer a new method for animals to travel. Perhaps certain species of heteromorpha specially equipped to break through hard structures are able to burrow inside the seed pods of the Siliquophyta. While they feed, some might get swept out to sea, eventually washing up on Oahro. These creatures, being the first inhabitants on the island, find themselves in a land with no predators and essentially infinite food. They will quickly enter an adaptive radiation, scrambling to fill all the vacant niches. The first new forms to evolve would be large herbivores, feeding on the essentially endless amounts of food. However, these creatures' boneless bodies prevent them from growing too large. To solve this problem, these creatures may employ a similar strategy to that of the Trampetolassa, but to a whole new extreme. Where the Trampetolassa had a small section of the stomach used for storing gas from their partially herbivorous diet, these completely herbivorous creatures may develop an entire separate chamber to store gas. Their boneless bodies allow them to stretch and inflate these chambers in ways that boned animals simply couldn't. This chamber could deflate at will, pushing gas out through the stomach, into the intestines, and out the other end. However, to refuel their gas chambers, these creatures need to eat, therefore they may be almost constantly grazing. These gas chambers allow them to grow to much larger sizes without getting too heavy. And most extraordinarily of all, they are able to float off the ground, as high as 2.5 meters provided they have a full gas chamber. When they are floating, they can access foliage higher up in the forest with ease. They can also travel further distances, and faster. We will call these floating behemoths the Ploteromorph. The Rectuputari discover the island shortly after the first heteromorpha make landfall. At first they would only use the island as a resting place and a nesting ground, but eventually some may decide to stay permanently. Perhaps one group develops flightlessness soon after arriving on the island, seeing as the energy needed for flight isn't worth it on such a small island with such abundant food. Instead of aquatic prey, these creatures could feed on the abundant Ploteromorph that cover the island. Although the Ploteromorph could escape via their gas chambers, takeoff is very slow. As they further specialize for life on the ground, they may lose their patagium entirely, with their legs adopting a splayed posture. These creatures' anatomy is still built for life in the air, and thus, they are very awkward on the ground. Their tongue may elongate to ridiculous lengths and develop an extremely thin, needle-like point, expressly designed for one purpose. When these predators charge a herd of Ploteromorph, they may not make it in time to capture one on the ground, so instead, they use their long tongue to pop the Ploteromorpha's gas chambers like living balloons, which is almost always fatal. In total, their tongue can extend to a maximum of 1.5 meters out of their skulls. When their tongue is retracted, it wraps around a specialized compartment in the skull, staying out of the way until it's needed. We will call these brutal killers the accusateriid. Other rectuputariid may also lose the ability to fly, however they may still want to avoid the chaos of ground level, so perhaps they develop a scansorial lifestyle. Although they may have lost the musculature required for powered flight, they may still retain the membrane that allows them to glide from tree to tree, while large claws allow them to scamper around branches. Additionally, their tails may become prehensile, allowing them to hang from tree branches while resting without risk of falling. However, the accusateriid, with their extremely large tongues, have a chance of plucking these creatures straight out of the air. Therefore, these creatures need some way of avoiding these predators. The accusateriid are slow and awkward, relying on their tongue to do most of the damage. Therefore, these creatures may opt to outspeed them. Perhaps their arms gain extra musculature, becoming extremely powerful. This allows these creatures to push off of trees with incredible force. When these creatures want to move fast, they push off of a tree with all their strength and glide to another tree. They wait until they are the right distance from the tree before abruptly slowing down, planting their arms on the tree, and pushing off in a new direction. This mode of gliding allows these creatures to rocket from tree to tree with extreme speed, and travel great distances with a single leap. We will call these forest rockets the pyroloteriid. Land-based animals aren't the only creatures that can experience rafting events. Perhaps a group of fluvicator get swept out to sea on a large mat of debris washed down their river home. By chance, these creatures might wash ashore on Oahro. When they arrive, they will find a world very different to the one they are used to. Oahro's small size means it lacks rivers, and thus these creatures have nowhere to go and are completely vulnerable to predators. When they arrive, they will find a world very different to the one they are used to. Oahro's small size means it lacks rivers, and thus these creatures have nowhere to go and are completely vulnerable to predators. They may opt to stay where they first washed ashore, in the muddy swamps near the island's coasts. These environments are full of dark grey mud, made from the volcanic soil that covers the island. Initially, they may bury themselves in the mud to hide from predators, but as they adapt to life on the island, they themselves may become the predators. The swamps are full of heteromorpha, so they may become these creatures' main food source. However, these fluvicator are adapted for an aquatic lifestyle, making them slow and clunky on land. This may prevent them from chasing down their prey, so instead, they may turn to ambush hunting. They may use what was initially a defense mechanism as a hunting strategy. They bury themselves in the mud and lie in wait. Their main weapon, their tongue, may become the same color as the local flora, mimicking a plant stem. Once prey is close enough, they strike, bashing their target with their spiky tongue. Interestingly, these creatures use their tongue for more than just hunting. Since these creatures were so specialized for life in the water, they found it difficult to move around, especially when escaping predators or fighting off rivals. Therefore, the tooth on the end of their tongue has become a third foot. They use their tongue as added support in addition to its role in hunting, granting this creature one of the strangest modes of movement on the planet. We will call these familiar-looking creatures the choanoglossa. There are bound to be thousands of islands on the planet, far too many to document, but these islands we've explored today offer a glimpse into how the unique conditions of islands can shape their inhabitants into some of the most strange and extraordinary creatures on the planet. These forms, behaviors, and lifestyles are completely alien compared to anything else on the planet. In the next episode we will witness some of the most chaotic conditions life on Makirraji has ever faced, as unusually high geological activity forces continents to collide. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the longest video I have ever made. And happy holidays. I will see you in the new year.